So here's my a new mantra for you, which is work less, live more, 10 times more purposeful. If you can lower the amount of actual work time, and use those like dedicated hours to maximize your purpose, and then you truly live more.
For too long, we've been led to believe that only two types of people can have an extraordinary creative career: creative genius and people who hustle so hard that they're working all the time. Here on the Everyday Talent Podcast, we are shattering that myth. This podcast is built on one truth, which is every one of us can have an extraordinary creative career. The way to get there is not by sacrificing all of ourselves to our work, but rather embracing our authentic selves and carve out unique paths to a fulfilling and joyful creative life. Hello and welcome. My name is Betty. I'm a creative and a coach for creators. I've coached photographers, filmmakers, visual artists, arts consultants, and arts leaders to make intentional career shifts and build thriving independent practices. This podcast is for you if you're looking to cut through the noise of what you should be doing in your creative career and figure out what actually works and matters for you. Before we begin, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your platform of choice. Leave us a rating and review and share this podcast on your social so that more amazing creatives out there can find out about this podcast and feel seen.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Talent Podcast. So this is the second episode aired in 2024, but it's actually the first episode that I'm recording in 2024. And I'm recording here not from my Canadian home. I'm actually currently in Taipei. If you've been following me on my social media, you know that I have been traveling abroad. Partially, part of it is my husband and my honeymoon. And we are also trying to try out remote working in Asia this winter. So I have been living in Taipei for 2 weeks now, and will be here for a couple more weeks before I take another trip with my family. And so I thought today's episode, as the first solo episode in the year, I want to share with you how has it been doing remote working in Asia. And also, for those of you who might be interested in the digital nomad life, I want to open up the behind the scene of what were the things that I set up so that enable this to be possible. So that would be the first dimension that we cover. Then I'm going to share with you what my workday actually looked like. You might have already gotten a glimpse of what that looks like if you follow me on my IG story. I've been pretty much updating daily updates on my IG story. But if you haven't followed me or you're not an IG user, don't worry. We're going to dive all into that in this episode. And in fact, I'm going to go even more in depth because in sharing with you what my workday looks like, I also share with you things that I did not expect. Some of them are bad surprises, and some of them are very, very good surprise. And overall, I would just say my husband and I both feel that we make exactly the right choice in trying this out, and also a validation for me in terms of when I built this creative business, one of my priority was to value flexibility. And what is a better way to exercise and live through flexibility than remote working? And of course, with that, there's some realism that comes with it. So we dive all into that. Okay, without further ado, the first thing I want to share with you is essentially three things that I absolutely thank myself for to make this happen. Three things that I did before the trip even began that I set up so that enable this to happen. And looking back, I am like, oh my gosh, Betty, thank you so much, the 2023 version of you, to have done that, because otherwise I would be so much stress, and I don't know if I would have had such as much of a good experience like now. those three things to go through one by one is one, I hire someone, a contractor, someone who I work with, to offload some of my workload. And essentially, it's also my first time as a business owner. As many of you know, I'm very much a solopreneur, but I have worked with contractors in the past, including editing and managing some of the podcast content. And now it's my other way to expand my team. I have hired someone part time, or rather as a service contractor, to help to do some of my consulting work. I still have my consulting clients, but this is a way for me to be able to collaborate with someone, but also cut down my workload. Because when I was envisioning this trip, one thing that was very clear to me, and I also work with my own coach to clear this out, is like, how much work do I actually want to do? And when I go into what my workday looks like, you will hear that actually I'm working max to max, like around 20 hours a week now. So how can I maintain, not only maintain, but like maintain the growth of my business while I'm abroad? Because by all means, my consulting, coaching, and filmmaking, they're all going the right direction. And I didn't want this trip to be just like an interruption. Rather, I saw it very much as another step into growing it, because I'm trying to work internationally. So in order to do that, then I had to both cut down my workload so that I can really enjoy my time abroad, but also upkeep with some of the clients' work. And so hiring someone as a contractor became the biggest, kind of most important investment that I did before 2024 comes around and before this trip happened. The second thing that I did, I thanked myself for, was I did a very good version of my draft text. So I don't know whether you are someone who do your own tax. So just to be clear, I don't report my own tax. I work with an accountant. But however, I do not have a bookkeeper. So very quickly, the distinction is that especially when you're running your own business or when you are a freelancer, you have to reconcile your expense and your revenue on an ongoing basis, so that at the end of the year you can prepare a complete picture to your accountant how to report, like, here's all the number to report on tax, because the accountant does not manage your day-to-day reconciliation. That's what a bookkeeper does. Whereas the accountant at the end would be the one that looks at your records and say, like, oh, this looks off, or this looks right, please answer this question, and this is how we are going to put it into a file and file to the tax agency. And in Canada context is the CRA. So in my case, I work with an accountant. So in the past 2 years of running my business, I always bookkeep myself. I use accounting software. I started, just be even more transparent, when I started, I used Waves, which is a platform that you can issue invoice for free. You can essentially get their bookkeeping function for free. They only charge when you make a transaction on it. Whereas now I've transitioned it to a more expanded, upgraded software, which is called Zero. And so on that platform, it allows, for example, multi-currency tracking. For now, it works very well for me because I work both in the Canadian context, and I also have clients internationally abroad that pay me USD. Anyway, that's very nerdy. We can go into more of that if you are curious about the finance side. But you know, in this particular episode, what I want to share is just that I know that I will be away Q1 2024. And when I'm away, the last thing I want to do is the receipts and all the reconciliation from past year. So I had messaged my accountant in November, I think, and I shared with her my plans. And she and I basically came up with a plan. She's like, why don't you just do all the bookkeeping close end of the year and have maybe a draft of your revenues and expense, all the things that we need to fill out. Do your best to have a draft to me. So before I went to Asia, I was in the West Coast for a little bit, but I was still in the country. I did a draft of that. And that, I have to say, if I'm someone who reconcile my expense and revenue pretty. I wouldn't say like super regularly. I started doing monthly reconciliation, but life happens, and I think last year it ended up being more like every other month or sometimes every 3 months. So it took me one full day at the end of the year, maybe even 1.5 day, to do the final like kind of like get my all my ducks in a row, put everything into the bookkeeping software platform, and then come up with the revenue and expenses. And I would also say last year was like the first year, even though I've been like the previous year was my first year in business, but last year was the year that I started doing it like a budget, a forecast. So the year ended up being pretty much on budget, and I am happy to share that I reached my stretch goal, which means like my dream goal for my revenue. And so there was a lot of numbers, as you can imagine, to like kind of like look at and input and all that stuff. So I did all of that before I fly out internationally and send an email to my accountant. And of course, when I'm here, I will still have to coordinate with her remotely to do the actual filing when March come. But I have one less thing to worry about. Like, in fact, I don't need to like be worried. Like, did I lose that receipt somewhere in my house? And now I have to just be okay with the fact that I don't have that receipt. I cannot report on certain expense. No, none of that. Clear out the way. So that is to say, if you are a creative entrepreneur, you're a solopreneur, you're a freelance practitioner, regularly reconcile your finance. It is part of the operation once you become a business owner. It's better to be okay and allocate time with it and make peace than try to avoid it. And so that's the second thing that I did that I thank myself for. The third thing that I did was I communicated very clearly my time boundaries to my clients. And that include both the people who are working with me, and I anticipated that they would continue to work with me when I'm traveling, and the people who had interest to work with me. So meaning for the people that I know that I will still meet, like my coaching clients, my consulting clients, I very early on, like I had planned this trip and made this decision, I think in mid 2023. And so like by the fall 2023, I had a very good idea of the travel plans. So I communicated to them what that looks like and when I'm abroad, when I will be available, and the fact that I would be cutting down my workload. And then for people who show interest to work with me, so I had done, discovery calls in November. I had returning clients that are interested to explore working with me again in 2024. And I also had people who were just at the very beginning of getting to know me, but might be a project that's coming in Q1 2024. For all of those inquiries, I had told them very explicitly what my boundaries are for the first quarter 2024. And I have to say, this last point that I did was, now looking back, it seems very easy to share this, but in times, even though I'm the person that, as you all know, uh, always promotes being able to say no is a sign of growth, it was not easy to, at times, to state these boundaries, because one thing that I learned in the process is that, well, first of all, uh, oftentimes you will find that projects like takes multiple conversations, maybe months in development to come into fruition. So even if what I notice is like even that for some partners or collaborators, I had communicated I would be out of the country by like mid last year or fall of last year. What I noticed that is like there's so much information for people to track. Often they don't forget that I was about to go away. In fact, one of the things that happened very funny in some way, I find it very funny in November and December, is lots of people would go on a call with me and they would be like, "Oh, how was your big trip?" And I had assumed that I already went abroad and come back. And I was like, "No, I'm just about to go away." And in fact, I would be going away for a few months. And so that was a surprise for me that I had to keep remind my boundaries. I had to keep reinforcing them. And Then there also were like projects that was like, wow, like this project is very interesting. I would like totally became, I'm very interested to do it. And the timing just wouldn't work, or we don't know yet that the timing would work. And so it's that constant kind of navigating my interest for projects and also value the opportunities that come my way, because I very cherish that I'm in this very good position that continue to grow the demand for my service. And I really thank all the collaborators. And at the same time, very gently to let them know that this trip that I'm about to take is also very important. It's very important for me. It's an important trip for my family. And so, uh, so that, like, I would say a very ongoing, constant, and fluid way of navigating the time boundary has not been easy at all. Even though deep down I was very certain that this I known for a long time last year this is what I was going to do. So I guess a sense of realism there for those of you who are considering this is that know that it doesn't just take one time. It doesn't take just like two times. It takes like constant, almost daily, like stating and be clear about your boundaries, but also not be super rigid, because I can tell you now there's two projects that I never thought that I would take on when I was forecasting that I would be away. But the people that I work with have been so accommodating to my time boundaries, and the project is so interesting that I ended up working on them. And so be flexible, but also be firm. I think that's the balance, or rather, those two things can coexist. You can be very clear what your needs are, and also not completely shut down people and shut down interests. Something that we continue all learning, isn't it? So, and now getting to the trip itself. So I did those three things to prepare myself, as you heard, hire someone, did my draft tax, clear out my finance for last year, and also clearly communicate my boundaries. And then going to this trip, what has happened then? Let me just give you an overview of what it looks like now in my week and how I work. And then I will share with you some of my reflections of how has it been and what's going on internally in my mind, what are some of the surprises. So right now, if you are a fly on the wall and follow me and in my week, this is what it looks like. So I am in Taipei, which is 13 hours ahead of the Eastern time in Toronto. Or another way to look at it is like 15 hours or 15, 16 hours ahead of Pacific time for those of you who are on the West Coast. And I'm pretty much either a time, 1 hour, or the exact same time zone as like rest of you in Asia. And then for those of you who are in Europe, I'm probably 7, 8 hours away from you. And actually, friends in Europe, if you want to talk to me, this is very good time to talk to me. I had just connected with a friend in Germany yesterday, and it was like the perfect time for both them and me. So just a little shout out there. So for me, then, because most of my clients and work are still in the Eastern time zone, it means that my evening will be their morning, and then my afternoon would be their like sleeping time, and my morning would be their evening. Okay, if you follow that route, essentially I had known that I would need to be able to take meetings still when I'm overseas and working. And so the boundary that I communicated is that I would be working until roughly 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. noon Toronto time, which meaning very early morning in the east in the western time. But that time boundary is there so that I can like take meetings for people who want to talk to me in the mornings of Toronto time. And I know, in fact, going into January. So I didn't really start working until mid-January, because the first 2 weeks of January, I was considering that as my vacation with my husband and also our honeymoon. But for the past 2 weeks, the meetings that were booked in this past 2 weeks, 80% of them were already booked in December. So that just shows you that my normal load of meetings is quite a lot. So I had to make room for even a scale back down workload. And so then if you look at my day, my regular work day will look like I get up and around 11. If I don't have a meeting in my morning time, it will be 10, 11 that I get up. Then I check my email do some work for about not very long, like half an hour to 1 hour. Then my husband and I will go for lunch, very delicious food in Taiwan here. So nothing to complain about. In fact, we just adore finding a good food spot and relax. Then we'll go to a cafe and do some errands or on our computer, or maybe that's also the time around maybe 2 to 4 is also the time that if I have any kind of deep work that I need to do. For example, right now at this moment is 3 p.m. local time in Taipei here, and I'm recording this podcast. So I either go to a cafe to do deep work on my computer, or I go back to our Airbnb and then we are doing work here. And then this is, as you know, this is the time that people in Canada or North America in general are in deep sleep. And so I get some interrupted work time to do my deep work. Then around 4, like 4:30, that's when I usually get tired. So 4 to 5, 4 to 6:30 even is my lounging around time. And so what that means is I don't do anything that's too intensive or crazy. So I don't even try to go too far away from the Airbnb. If I go for a walk, you'll be nearby here. I haven't really developed a workout routine, so perhaps that also would potentially be one of the spots that I will start doing, like go to the gym. But if I'm at home, I might be taking a nap, I might be reading a book, I might be playing some mindless games on the internet. Basically, it's my brain shutdown time. Then at 6:30 we have dinner. Then by 8 p.m. I'm back online doing work. And so if you have been tracking the time difference, that would be Toronto time, 7 a.m. So I got a little more time to do the work again because rarely are people meeting at 7 a.m. in Toronto. And certainly Pacific time, that would be like in the middle of the night. So nobody is talking to me at the time. But my meetings usually now start my time either at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., which meaning Toronto time 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. And so the meetings can span from 8 a.m. Toronto time to 11 or 12, or some days maybe end a little bit early. Uh, but it does not go past. Like I look at my calendar, there's might be one or two exceptions that I do early afternoon Toronto time meeting, but that's so exceptional that is something that only on exceptional chance that I'm making those situation. But on a regular day, I am a day noontime Toronto time. So meaning every day, if we repeat the cycle for Monday and Thursday, I will be working roughly like 5 to 6 hours every day. And if I don't have lots on my load, I won't even be working in the afternoon. I will just work on the evening. And on Friday, from Friday to Sunday, I'm off. And that's our travel time. So we'll be meeting friends, meeting new friends, also traveling to neighboring city. And in February, we'll probably travel a little bit around the island in Taiwan. So that is what the nitty gritty of my day or my week look like, very transparently. And I think 2 weeks in, we found a rhythm. And so how is that working out internally? How do I feel? How's my energy like? What's been some surprises? First of all, I have to say, to find this rhythm, it wasn't like overnight transformation. So let me just take a sip of tea. And the reason I'm taking a sip of tea, and I don't know whether you can hear it from my voice, is that in fact, for the first 2 weeks of January, even like 3 weeks, even up to last week in the weekend, my husband and I have been taking turn to be very sick. And it's not COVID, it's something respiratory though. I read on Vox that almost everybody is having some respiratory disease this season. And I hear lots of colleagues and friends also have that. And we're pretty sure it's some kind of like, it's not a flu either. It's some kind of virus infection. Let's just call it on our. It starts with cold chills and then it evolves into. It's not a cold. It skips the cold part. It just goes into really bad coughs, and it's not COVID. And so anyway, my husband got it. He passed it to me, and for the first week, basically, as you remember, I mentioned I started working mid January. That first week, I was so sick that I lost my voice completely for a good like two-thirds of the week. And I think part of it is also that looking back, I think is that my body was also resisting the change of the schedule. For a long time, even though I knew I was going to brace the evening work time, when I was back in Toronto, when I was preparing for this trip, I had a lot of anxiety around what is it going to be like to work in the evening. I'm such a morning person. I've always known myself to be a morning person. So I wonder subconsciously whether my body was kind of resisting this element of change. And so it also manifested in like physical like sickness, plus that there was like, lots of sickness going around this winter. So when I landed in Taiwan and we were starting to work, I was not feeling well. In fact, I felt so bad by mid Wednesday, like by midweek last week Wednesday, that I just woke up and broke down crying and had a good cry. And I highly encourage, I'm a big advocate for crying because sometimes you just cannot rationalize how you feel other than you feel very bad. I was feeling very bad, mainly feeling like, well, why were we here? This is not like, I feel like it's such a struggle to show up at night because I'm not feeling physically well. Then, very miraculously, actually, after that day of crying, I just recover significantly. I think that emotionally release really helped. So after that, I rebounded and healed, and I was happy to share that now I feel like 90% back to normal self. What I noticed is that the body, even though it was resistant to change, it was also very adaptable. I noticed that so the day one was definitely a struggle to have even meeting. Day two was a struggle. By day three and day four, it was like going into a rhythm. It didn't feel like it was so bad to have evening meetings anymore. And as long as I stick to that schedule that I wake up later, I don't do a lot of intensive things during the work week. I have energy to show up in the evening. And of course, I would say one thing that I notice acutely now is that energy once needs to show up to a coaching call, a meeting, like something that has the human interaction, is very different from the energy that one needs for deep work. And that's true no matter where you're at. I mean, I work with clients where they struggle to find that spot for deep work. And now, actually, with this split, I don't get interruption during my day. So that 2 hours in the afternoon, I get so productive if I need to do deep work. And then for evening, when I need to meet people, usually because the people that you meet feed off your energy. So I get a lot of energy meeting my clients and talking about interesting things and coaching them. So I don't actually notice, even though I can see at the back of my mind that, okay, my mental state at the evening probably not the most conducive for deep work like creative writing or something that requires a lot of deep thinking. But it is okay to, I shouldn't say that it's not conducive for deep thinking because I am totally functioning coaching in the evening. In fact, right now I'm in the last mile finishing my advanced coaching training, and my peers, I just coached in class the other day because we took turns to practice. My peers was kind of jokingly remarking to me, it's one thing that you are coaching and your coaching is continue to improve, but it's another thing to see you coach at midnight your time because that's amazing. And I said, wow, I totally don't notice that when I'm in the zone. So very amazed and very good surprise. Thank you, body. You're adaptable, amazing thing that you're able to do that in a short amount of time and change to a new pace. So the other good element of surprise, I guess, is that I want to share with you that in December, whereas we were kind of essentially packing up and ready to go, and in the last 2 weeks of work, I was feeling, and I was sharing widely with people close to me, that I was feeling a deep sense of fatigue. That wow, I had worked so hard last year, even though I was like very intentional with my workload and not burning out, but I feels like it was a big year, like both personal fronts and work fronts. There was a lot of energy output. So every day I would like be showing up to work or personal stuff to take care and feel like a deep sense of fatigue. And I know, and as I shared on the podcast before, whenever I notice those signs, I need to be very careful because that's just like one thin line between that and burnout, right? So I knew that I needed a break. And I was like, would I just go on vacation and not want to work? Part of me was like, wow, maybe I would be having so much fun traveling that I'd be dreading coming back to work. And I have to tell you what surprised me is at the tail end. So we took from mid December, the third week of December to mid January, we were completely off for vacation. At the tail end of that vacation, I was missing work so much. And part of me even felt guilty that was like, oh my God, I'm such a workaholic. Like, why do I miss work? But when I got to Taiwan and after I got my body felt better last week, there was kind of like a eureka moment because also in Taiwan, we haven't really met all of our friends here yet, but there's a lot in Asia in general. You notice that people work long hours, they work really hard here. And I was kind of observing the work culture here or also reflecting on my own body of work. And what I realized is this coaching, consulting, filmmaking, what I'm doing right now is my life's work. It's as plainly as that. That I realized just because I am somewhere else in a total different culture, interacting with different people, those things don't change. I still desperately want to go back to do coaching when I was on vacation. I still want to improve my craft. I still want to make films, which there's a lot of like new development there that I'm excited to share later in this year. And I'm also excited to go talk to my organization clients for the consulting work. I like was wondering of the tail end of my vacation when I was uh, fully recharged, how are they all doing? What's the new possibility of 2024? I'm not looking to change a career, essentially. And that is a big aha for me, even though it's such an intuitive thing, perhaps, to share. But for a long time in my career, there was this like little sense of like, what if? What if I'm someone who work in a corporate creative marketing agency? What if I'm not a filmmaker at all? I'm like someone who work in finance. Like there was like, I'm sure this can resonate with you for those of you who continue to navigate the what ifs in your career path for a great long time, like very, very long time in my career, the what if never stop. And when you have those what if, you ask yourself, if I move to Asia, if I move to Europe, what would it look like there? And would I just switch my career? And having been traveling in Asia for the past month, and then also started remote work, I think it has kept me so crystal clear. I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do. And even though I am looking to continue to expand my reach and perhaps have even more international reach, it doesn't change the nature of work. And I love what I'm doing. And I am surprised that like it's only sometimes it's funny, it takes you travel so far away from home to realize what is important to you. And I shared that thought with my husband the other day, and we both agree what a privilege that I have that kind of grounding and found that center point. So that was another surprise. And also, maybe it took, like, deep down in me, I was looking for that kind of reassurance in designing this trip and coming abroad. So, always to say, for those of you who are in my community and my clients, I love you guys, and I cannot wait to work with you if I haven't already talked to you coming back to work. Uh, and the last bit of good surprise, but also it is not really a surprise. I was kind of like hoping this will happen, but it didn't happen the way that I anticipated. Is that I am more inspired here. I mean, the fact that I had that grounding insight about my connection to my purpose in work is already inspiration. But I was imagining when you think about working remotely and being a digital nomad or traveling abroad, what do you imagine? What I imagined was like, oh, I would be so in flow to like create, and I would like create content. I would write script, which I'm working on right now. And I guess the best surprise of that is that just because you're traveling, it doesn't come necessarily mean that you have creative inspiration. That's one thing that I've learned. And in fact, because your time is like now, my time when you're traveling is fractured into segments, it's actually take even more intentional work to find that spot that you can do creative work. And so I imagine I would be so inspired to create content and whatnot. But like I actually like think that that's not the kinds of inspiration that I've been getting. And that there is a little element of romanticization of like really like the relationship between travel and creativity. I think that's definitely true. But even though that kind of inspiration hasn't come yet, I am surprised the inspiration that does come is that I now look at everything in my work and career and life a little with a distance, which is a new which is a reflection perspective that allow me to do more intentional visioning for the next few years in my life and my family's life. And that is very valuable. And I did not anticipate that it would be so monumental so quickly because like I think pretty much once we got to Taiwan and started talking about the future, we've been having nonstop conversation about the future of my business, the future of this podcast, the future of our family lives, future where we will live. So it just opens up those like possibility for those conversations that certainly you can have them when you're in working from your home country as well. But I think traveling on being en route just sets you in that mood, which I welcome. And along the side of this, I the other day my good friend Jesse sent me this article on Toronto Life, which I really love about working less and living more. The title of the article is literally "Work Less, Live More," and they interview a lot of people around this concept of like lots of especially the generation of millennials and Gen Z are now looking to be consciously underemployed, meaning people are either taking a pay cut to a job that fits their schedule and hobby and holistic well-being more, or they are just consciously saying no to toxic work culture, toxic work job, work setting, which, as you know, on this podcast, we've been talking a lot around that topic. And after my big trip, exactly 1 year ago, the first article or the first e-news that I shared was, what if work is not everything in life? And I think that's just a testament that now that is not just us who are on this podcast that's thinking about that. It's a generational trend. It's also the trend of our shifting our mindset and our thinking around career. And I've been thinking a lot while I'm abroad now in this setting, as I'm sharing with you that, like, this digital nomad life, what a career means, what work means. And because, of course, as I have shared my travel photos, the amazing food we eat, the amazing scenery that we see, there's a lot of like compliments I receive on like in social media. And thank you so much for following my journey. And I think it's easy for us to look at like the travel and work life with a sense of like tinted rosy glass, essentially, and romanticize it. And in my experience, in the just in 2 weeks in off court, and I hope that I've shared with you, there have been challenges. When you're sick, it's very bad. Adjusting schedule is a challenge. There's also been incredible rewards, being able to take a distance, be at distance, look at your vision, and getting those aha moments that you might not necessarily get in your home front. But I think being here and now, I'm in some way literally doing an experiment of working less and live more. And at the same time, having even a more refreshing relationship and enduring relationship with my work. What I will share is this in terms of this aspiration of working less and live more. I completely agree with this statement. What I disagree is that we necessarily need to put work and career as almost a necessary evil, because I think that sometimes in the rhetoric of working less, we just like kind of measure or look at work as work is just bad. Like, can we just like all work towards not working anymore? I have to say, I don't completely agree with that, especially in my recent experience now that I'm here and I cherish work so much and I love this like kind of like work and life balance. I think that we really need to make a distinguishing factor between purposeful work and purpose aligned work and mindless or aimless work. So the problem of why the zeitgeist or the trend towards working less, live more is not necessarily the work itself, and it's not necessarily our career have any issue. It's all the other things, right? It's the toxic culture, the hustle, the belief that you need to work hard, but then you don't actually get like work hard to like you need to work hard to get anywhere in life. All those things I think is having a monumental shift so that we can land on more purposeful work. So my new mantra is actually not just work less and live more, because I think that sentence is not complete. And I've been kind of sitting with it and taking issue with it, because just working less is not going to make you any happier if your work is intrinsically not changing. If your work is not purposeful and intentional, working less hours don't make you just happier, because if you don't like get any satisfaction from your work side, even you minus those out lower those hours, you're still struggling and you're still suffering. And then even after work, when you go live more, it's always just going to be a compensation from the life side to compensate what you suffer from work. That philosophy doesn't sit well with me. So here's my new mantra, a new mantra for you, which is work less, live more, 10 times more purposeful. If you can lower the amount of work time, actual work time, and use those like dedicated hours to maximize your purpose, and then you truly live more. That's very different from just minus the work time. Really wanted to share this segment or this last bit with you as I was writing the talking points for this episode, because I don't want you to take away from this podcast episode, even though you might be very curious what my new working dynamic is while working abroad. I don't want to be just another voice that say, yes, everybody go and travel and work less and live more and enjoy life. I think that if you have purposeful work and value aligned work, and that's actually my biggest realization with this trip, is that if you have that, yes, you can lower the amount, control the amount that you work. That's important. But more important is that purpose alignment is going to make your life all around so much better, and regardless of where you work. And so it doesn't matter whether you have the flexibility or I recognize it's such a privilege to be able to sign this life to work abroad because of the nature of our work. But if even if you don't have that, remember what grounds you is that connection and the purpose and the intention with your body of work. So a little bit of rambling there, but this is a topic that I feel like I'm continuing to uncover, and I'm also very interested in your perspective. That up next, either in the next episode or in the next few episodes, one of the topic that I want to cover and I will continue to reflect on, and I welcome you to send me a note about your thoughts on this, is what does it mean to be developing a career then when we all want to work less? Um, no answer is wrong there. So please drop me a message on either social media or send me an email. On this podcast, as you probably already get a sense. If you've been following for a while, you know that I'm also learning and continuing to share my learning and insights with you as we go. I am a thinking partner both for my clients who I coach, but also for those of you who tune into this podcast. So I thank you here for showing up. And if you like this episode, please leave a review or follow the podcast on any podcast platform that you use if you haven't followed it yet. We are also on YouTube, so you can follow it there as well. And I look forward to connect with you and continue sharing insights with you. See you on the next episode.